one of the things that we talk about a decent amount in pastoral world, but people don't know how to ask, is what happens to pastors in dry, like, spiritual seasons.
Yeah.
Because it's inevitable, right? Like, pastors will go through dry spiritual seasons.
Yeah.
And so I'd be curious to know, like, how do you navigate those kinds of seasons in your life?
Oh man. So we just talked about this the other day. Not in these words, but I mentioned to you that one of my top spiritual gifts is the gift of suffering.
I can't stop thinking about that. Lord help you. That's wild.
I know it's not great. Well, I mean, maybe it is great. I feel okay. Basically, the spiritual gift of suffering is the ability to maintain a victorious spirit, knowing that like God has conquered all, even while enduring great suffering. And so,
helping others through great suffering, or you yourself
like,
going through great suffering?
You yourself can endure great things.
Okay.
With like it's not toxic positivity. Like I genuinely
can do it.
Can like totally embrace a spirit of praise and like joy while like people are calling for my head, you know,
while your life is falling apart.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, praise you, Lord.
Yeah, it's a thing. So
wild, yeah.
So me going through like dry seasons is hard. Like I don't want to negate that.
Yeah.
But I think that there's just an element that like, man, music is such a huge power for me. And so like, even if like I'm going through a season where like I've been reading the Bible and digging into the Bible and I feel like God isn't talking to me, like I can always go to worship music and hear God speak.
Oh, that's cool.
Like I can always through praise hear God speak to my soul.
Do you have go-to like artists that you listen to?
Oh, so many.
For that specific thing?
Oh yeah. Like I'm like, when in doubt, I will revert to gospel music. So like a CeCe Winans or a Travis Green.
Yeah.
I'm really liking Jonathan Traylor lately. So like there's a few that Tasha Cobbs. Oh my gosh, Tasha Cobbs. She's a powerhouse vocalist.
I'm out of my genre element with gospel, but
sorry.
Can I say something really funny?
Go for it.
So do you know Forrest Frank? You know, Forrest Frank is huge right now.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
And we were having a conversation in our house because we've been playing a lot of Forrest Frank, as everybody else has been. If you're in the Christian music world, it's kind of got a gospel flair.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, what does Forrest Frank look like, Megan?" And she was like, "What do you think he looks like?" And I totally thought he was a black man. He is not. He's like a hipster white guy with a mullet, and I was way off.
Yep.
So,
no, I love that.
Anyway, that made me laugh.
Yeah.
Sorry, Forrest.
Yeah. So, but that's for me, like that's how I navigate the seasons of dryness.
Yeah.
Is like
music.
Yeah, is music. And I just remember that like I've gone through these seasons. Like I've had like, I think the longest dry season, so to speak, that I've had has been over a year.
Yeah.
Or like for over a year. It just, everything feels like work.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And where things are just really, really hard. Because like I can handle it when things get thrown at me. What's hard for me truly is the not hearing God speak. That's the part where like, I mean, theologically, people argue about what hell is like, but one of the interpretations of hell is that it's purely knowing who God is and knowing you're not in his presence.
Oh,
and
golly,
like
that sounds intense.
That's what I feel like when I go through like a dry
heavy.
season, is it's like I know God exists. I felt him before. I know what it's like to be in his presence, and I can't feel his presence anymore.
Sure.
That's when I really, really struggle, and that's where I always have to go back to music because it's the only place.
That's cool.
So
in school for your undergrad, you studied music, right?
Yes.
With minor?
No,
in music?
major.
You majored in music?
I majored in music.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Like I could totally see that.
Yeah.
Music's been a huge part of my life, but ironically, when I'm in spiritually dry seasons, I don't think to go to music. So that's like kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
One of the things that was really freeing for me is, I mean, years ago, this was a long, long time ago that I heard this, that Mother Teresa, after she died, they were going through her journals.
Yeah.
And are you familiar with this?
I have that book.
You do?
Yeah.
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 And like Mother Teresa, who's like her holiness kind of
Yeah.
thing. I mean, she's Louise,
Yeah.
Mother Teresa. She was like the last 30 years of her life really struggled to believe that she was hearing from God.
Yeah.
And there was a deep spiritual dryness in her life that for me, when I read that, was sad to hear, but normalized like spiritual dryness for you know, clergy, right? I mean, whether that's a nun or a priest or a pastor or you know, whatever. I was like, oh man, like if Mother Teresa can go through that dry season, then I can at least acknowledge it with the people who are closest to me in my life, right? I mean, because it's really tough. It's a tension.
Yeah.
Like I've gone through really dry seasons that have lasted a really long time, and like I'm not going to get up on a stage and tell people you know, like that I'm in that spot or whatever. But when you experience this like deep intimacy with God, like, and then you don't have that, it's complicated to try to figure that out. But I think acknowledging it to friends have been really important. And like, we'll talk a little bit about spiritual practices and spiritual disciplines in a little bit. But one of the things that I find myself doing in those seasons is I've learned to be wise enough in those moments to actually go through the dozens of spiritual practices that I've learned and that I've processed and grown in and practiced over the years, and actually see what sticks. And so I'll just try different things. Like I'll be like, all right, well, it might be reading this book, or it might be reading this type of a devotional, or it might be going through a guided liturgy. Like right now I'm going through guided liturgy from a woman named Phyllis Tickle. I led our staff through this yesterday. And it's really slow. Like in certain seasons, like that's not going to be helpful. But for me right now, wintertime, like it's actually really slowing me down. And it's like, I really like the depth of what she has to write in these writings. And I'm moving through it slowly. But other times it's like fasting. Like I take the mentality that like Jesus, and I'm going to take scripture out of context here.
Oh, no.
But here we go. Here's some heresy. Like when the disciples are trying to like cast demons out of people and they come back and they're like, teacher, we can't do it. And he's like, some of these can only come out through prayer and fasting.
Yep.
And so I take the perspective that like maybe there's a dry season in my life, and the only way to actually like get out of that dry season is actually to fast. So I've been fasting a lot more when I'm in those seasons. Centering prayers have been huge for me. Like this morning I did centering prayer. I was like literally in my office on my couch that I love. And I think I fell asleep. I'm not entirely sure. There's a lot of falling asleep when I do centering prayer.
Fair enough.
I'm not, or like it's so relaxed and so centered that I'm like, I'm not entirely sure if I fell asleep. Like it's weird, right?
Yeah. It's the weird half space.
Yeah, it's really odd. One of the biggest ones, though, is journaling. I'm a huge external processor, which is a gift for me when it comes to like a practice like journaling. But ironically, it's not the thing that I want to do.
Okay.
I struggle to journal. I do a lot more note taking on my phone than I do journaling. So I'm getting thoughts out, but actually sitting and writing my thoughts out and the hard things out has actually been something that's getting me out of that. The last thing I'll say, and maybe I'm going too far with this. Actually, I don't want to say this because we're going to come back to this with spiritual disciplines.
Okay.
So I'm going to hold off on this.
Okay. I'm going to put pin in it.
I'm going to put a pin in. That's a weird noise.
Yeah.
Gross. How did that sound in the headphones, Jason?
No,
Gross.
don't like it.
So I'll ask this next question, and,
Okay.
we'll go back to the spiritual disciplines later.